Boom.
Welcome to another episode of Mafia's Greatest Hits. I don't really know. We're just swinging it with the names. Right now it's Bill, and Bill. So, what's up, Bill?
What's up, Bill?
Which Bill you talking to, man?
Either one. Oh man!
Come on, we got to milk this, right? We got to milk the Bill, and Bill thing. Right. You know, come on.
Yeah, we didn't even know that at first. Like, we were kind of on the show when we figured out everybody's name was Bill. But hey, let's get to the brass tacks here. Staxx just had a good interview with Lee Cole.
Wow.
So walk us through that, Staxx.
Yeah, I did. I didn't think that was ever going to happen ever in my life. Ever. But hey, you know, sometimes you just got to put things, you know, figure out when you're wrong and move on, you know.
It was a good look,
so
man.
Who apologized first?
I was there a year ago when it happened. This was a better look.
It was kind of like both. It was kind of both. But he was like, you know what? I was really thinking about it, man. He's like, and I'm the one that really draw first blood with blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know, and I was like, I said some things I shouldn't have said. And, you know, it is what it is. Like, move on. And that's what we did.
Well, that's the thing. And it kind of shows, like, how he was a big man about it, too. I'm really impressed with Lee Cole because he said a lot of things about you over the last year. For him to reach out and do that, I have a lot more respect for him. You know, not that I didn't like the guy or anything. I don't care one way or the other. But a lot more respect for him that he reached out to you like that and stuff. Of course, we're friends, so anybody who attacks you, I'm always cringing when they do. Not that I hate people, but, you know, I don't like people who attack my friends and stuff. But I'm impressed that he came forward. And like I said, I've always kind of liked this show and stuff. But I like him more after tonight.
Yeah, people can always you can get more when you work, like when you don't have that negative around you.
Yeah, you don't need it. Yeah,
I don't. I have a
lot
going on.
It takes your mind off of what you really want to accomplish.
Oh man, Chicky, thank you so much for that, man. I really appreciate it, man. You have no idea.
Chicky's a good man.
Thank you.
Hey, Chicky, man. Hope all's going up well for you up there, man.
Chicky, if you want to pop on here, man, you're more than welcome, man. I'll drop the link for you, Chicky.
Chicky's always welcome, man.
Even though your name's not Bill. This is the Bill hour over here.
Well, guys, it could cause some confusion, you know. I mean, we might get confused. So if we bring Chicky in, you know.
Yeah, we might.
We can make him an honorable Bill for the night, right?
Yeah, keep... so we know who's who.
Exactly.
It's a common name too. But I'll tell you a quick story. I was getting a checking account at like a Chase Bank, and there's a young girl there with, like, I don't know if she had purple hair or what she had, right? So I'm getting a different kind of account, right? And my wife's standing there, and she's like, "So what's your name?" I go, "William Crooks," right? She goes, "Do people call you Bill?" I go, "Yeah, sometimes." She goes, "That is so cool." My wife's like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?"
Oh man. Hey Chicky, what's up?
Milk it for everything you can get out of it, right?
What's up, gentlemen? How are you? Listen, I don't got much time. I just want to say shout out to all you gentlemen, all the chat. Staxx, keep doing your thing. I said to Angel like 3-4 days ago, you can go back and check. You're the most underrated guy on YouTube. You do great interviews. You got big things coming in the next 2 weeks. We don't even have to discuss it. You'll see. And you got big things in the future with us. You're around us. We got movie things. We got documentaries. You're going to be with us. You're going to help us with our YouTube channel. So just keep doing the right thing. Don't get involved in this bullshit, back and forth bullshit. And you're going to do big things. And stick with the guys that are around you, like these guys here on your podcast. And the sky's the limit. Don't get aggravated by all this bullshit. Just be a good father like you are. Be a good son, and that's all that matters. Everybody else, you know what they can go do, because 90% of the people talking shit about you don't even talk to their kids. So just keep being a good father, keep being a good son, help your mom. And I'm not going to stay on long, but I salute to you, Staxx, to your people on, and to your chat. Just keep doing the right thing, bro, and you're going to kill it, okay?
Thank you,
Well
man. I
said,
appreciate
Chicky.
it. With
You got
friends
it,
like
guys.
you,
Have a good
bro,
show. I got to
can't
go.
go
Have a good
wrong.
show. All right, bro. I'll talk to you
Great
tomorrow.
words, Chicky. Thanks, man. Thanks so
You
much.
got it, bro. Ciao.
Thank
Bye-bye
you,
now.
man. Yeah, with words like, I mean, with friends like him, man, you can't go wrong. You know,
Talk about great man, good man.
really.
He's
Stand up
got a
dude.
tight group of friends, man, around him. You know, you can't ask for any more in life, right?
Definitely.
And
man.
great grandkids, 2 beautiful grandbabies, 2 beautiful daughters. Man, he's a lucky man. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna get on with the show pretty soon and quit patting Staxx on the back. But I'll
Yeah,
do it one
stop
more
that,
time.
man. Stop. My back's getting
I just want
sore.
to say, like, I knew Bill before he even started a show and stuff, and a lot of things have changed. But you were a pioneer, man. You did a lot of stuff, like with the video tricks and everything, and people stole a lot of your stuff. And I did a little bit, you know, I stole the green screen stuff. Like by the time I came on, I'd already stolen all your tricks, and like, got you know. Because everybody, as soon as I came on, they're like, dude, Crook's got a great studio. I got it all from Staxx.
Yeah.
They told me how to set it up, how to do it all and everything. And
Hey, man, I helped out a lot of people. A lot of people,
Yeah.
even people that hate me and can't stand me now and just talk about me, I helped you too. So it's okay. I mean, I just move on and be around positive people.
Yeah.
That's it. You know?
Yeah, we appreciate you, man. But
You
he's
guys
way
are great.
smarter and way more talented. Chicky nailed it. You're the most underrated guy on YouTube, man. People are
I
going to
appreciate that.
Oh, there's so
Wait
much
till you-
coming in the future for you, Billy.
Wait till you see that what I did today, man. Underrated is not even. I did the best interview of my career, man. Like I think
Oh, really?
it's incredible, bro. This kid put a 12 gauge shotgun under his chin and pulled the trigger,
Wow.
and he survived it. Came on here, told his story, and I'm dropping that tomorrow. And you guys are gonna be like, what? His survival story is so inspirational. Like it's incredible. Incredible.
Yeah,
God,
it
you
is
find the
incredible.
most
But it would
amazing
be a
people and
pretty
the most
boring
amazing
interview had
stories.
he not survived it, you know. But
Crazy.
anyway,
Yeah,
hey,
tomorrow.
so we ended up with the Black Hand last time. Where do we end up? They busted Sam Lima, right?
Oh, you want me to go back to that? Oh, he's causing all kinds of trouble here.
We're going to pick up from there.
Actually, what they did, I'll tell you,
hang on. We're going back
let's
to your
clarify
book.
it. Yeah, well, let's clarify it here. If you're going to go back to show a picture of the book first, the book's called Inspector Oldfield and the Black Hand Society. There it is in the top right, top corner there by Bill Crooks's head. So what happens with these guys? The Society of the Banana, by the way, the Black Hand is just a general term for before it was really called the Mafia. You know, consistently in the media, that kind of thing. And there were different gangs around the United States. It primarily started in the port cities of New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New Orleans. But actually, New Orleans was really the beginning of it. And what happened was that when guys, after the Hennessy murders in 1890, the chief of police of New Orleans and a huge crackdown on Italians and especially organized crime Italians in that area, they began to come up the Mississippi River, right? And they went into the extremely wealthy Great Lakes where all the money was. The Rockefellers, the Carnegies, all the factories, all the cars, you know, all those manufacturing. It was the wealthiest part of the country. You know, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Buffalo, you know, that area had all the money in the whole United States. It was so rich. So let's get back. So now, you know, the people who hadn't heard that before. So those gangs started to organize or franchise, if you want to call it, right? And so,
Right.
and started to get together, and instead of just being individual gangs, they started franchising and sharing money. They called it a mutual aid society amongst themselves. And, you know, if they were able to extort money from one particular group or family that was very wealthy somewhere in the United States, they then would send money orders to each of the bosses of each city. and then that money would be distributed down to the lower levels of their local gang. So really, they were franchised. So they truly were organized, and they had occasional meetings where they actually got together, like people have heard, where the bosses and the capos of each city come together and talk and re-elect a new head boss.
Right, kind of like
What's
the
that?
summits they had, kind of like the summits they had in 1950 and all that.
Yes, except they had them all the way back then. The first known summit was March 9th, 1909. And that was actually staked out by federal officers because the postal inspectors, because they had the ability to know what was going on because mail and telegraph was pretty much everything, and occasional telephones. They weren't as common though, that everybody had one. But so after we talked last week,
their connection though, Bill, was it a blood tie from Sicily?
Well, there's some ties, mainly from, we look at Trebia, northwest of Palermo. We look at the Termini and Marisi area of Palermo, which would be the dockyards, where all the shipping was, that area. You also had the Camorra, from the southern, from the boot part of Italy. And when they all get to the United States, for the most part, they stay within their own families when it comes to making somebody and actually joining them by a vow of blood. But if they're, they still would work together loosely, like I said, like the franchising and the mutual aid, to make sure everybody did okay, and make sure, and under cover of their, their own family businesses, that sort of thing, to try to look like they were not terribly wealthy. That was the outward appearance. And but the amount of money that was shared was exceptional. And the real boss was after the 1890s, up in the early 1900s, 1901, 1902, was a gentleman originally from Baltimore by the name of Salvatore Arrigo. He started out as a fruit seller, of course, then a counterfeiter, did federal time for counterfeiting, and not paper money, but coins. That took guts back then to counterfeit coins, but you had to be pretty good at it. And then he moved over to Cincinnati, Ohio, to get away from all his trouble from Baltimore and Washington area. And he was chosen as as sort of an early national boss, loosely. New York and Chicago would still kind of run their own show, but they still would stay in touch with Arrigo. And their bosses of Chicago and New York would be considered basically equal. They were all peers, but they would still come for the meetings. And then Arrigo had men under him that he would call overseers, a little different than we call captains or capos today, and made men, whatever. Overseers would be someone who'd look over an entire city. Say Cincinnati.
Can I ask you a question, Bill? Because I was listening to a podcast a couple days ago, and they said,
right,
and they contested to this. They were like, "Oh, it's absolute." They said that there was evidence of them using the same structure that they use today, copper regime, all this stuff, back in the 1800s. Is that true?
Yes, there's some evidence of it, but unfortunately, the only way to get the actual proof would be to get it from the families and some of their old original letters and archives. Now, I have quite a few original letters between the gang members, the bosses of different cities, as part of the original investigation from Inspector Oldfield. He kept all the evidence and brought it home. So I have a lot of the original pieces of letters that have been translated between them. They do not call each other anything like that. In the letters, they call each other friend. They call themselves the Brotherhood. They call themselves, when someone has been extorted and given money, they say that we have funds for the Mutual Aid Society. They don't really, they never talk about
the
capos.
Government, don't they?
Yeah,
they do.
I
do. Now, here's something that is interesting, that is exposing, like you said, Bill, like Staxx. I'm going to call you Staxx from now on.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna get confusing.
Okay, so what you heard on that podcast is there's still work to be done. I'm looking for actual handwritten or typewritten notes between them where they refer to each other, and they're all usually in code, so it's difficult for them to say. Well, they'll usually use the person's name, say, Orazio Runfola, was running Pittsburgh. They'll say our brother Runfola is what they'll say. They won't say, capo, capo or capo regime run folla, Now, if someone's the boss, I have a letter from Salvatore Lima, who writes a letter to a gentleman in Buffalo, New York, and Giuseppe DiCarlo, who was at the time was the boss of Buffalo, and he writes him a letter saying, that money will be coming from recent work that we've been doing, as they said, and by the way, we had a meeting, on March 9th, 1909, where we retired the elderly Salvatore Arrigo and elected a new boss of the Bananas,
I remember that.
Francesco Spadaro, a saloon owner from Cincinnati. They made him the new boss. And for your information, I was elected overseer of Cleveland and Cincinnati, and that would be the second from the left.
He's the Salvatore, one that they appointed, right?
As he's the one they chose as, quote, like I said, overseer.
The overseer, yeah.
Since at that meeting, the bosses elected him as overseer of Cleveland and Cincinnati. And
does it show on that chart who was in the position before him?
There was no overseer before that. I think that they liked his operational capability, that they decided to, at that meeting, all those different bosses, they decided, what, let's make him the overseer, because there was sort of there wasn't somebody running with Francesco Spadaro becoming the big boss. Today they might call it a godfather or capo di tutti capo, but so they basically needed somebody who was good at operations. So they said Salvatore Lima in Marion, Ohio, which was an very industrial city northwest of Columbus, Ohio. So they just decided that Salvatore, the guy second from left, would become the overseer of the two cities. The old boss is a terrible picture of him, is second from the right with the beard and all that. That's the picture they took of him when he was captured. There are other pictures of him when he's all cleaned up in a suit and tie.
Well,
they caught him out in Batavia, Ohio.
Yeah, he was on the run. He must have been, right? Because he's all scruffy.
Yeah. It was a big, nasty chase with shotguns and all that. Yeah, they caught him on his front porch, of a house in Batavia out in the woods. And that's his son next to him on the right. That's Vincenzo Arrigo.
Man, they should have left him alone.
I know they retired him. Now, the guy just below, if you want to pop up one more time, the bottom row, the far right picture with the little square frame around it, rectangular frame. Yeah. That's Francesco Spadaro. That's the new boss of the Bananas, the new boss.
Yeah.
Now, just for everyone's knowledge, these guys, all went down. 14 of them went down to either Sing Sing or Fort Leavenworth for up to 14 years. I think Salvatore Arrigo, the guy on the right with the beard, got 14 years or 12 years, excuse me. Now, after they finished,
his original question, 1800 seems early to me to say that it was like the model of the mafia that we saw today. I don't think so, because I don't think you could put together that kind of organization with the travel restrictions and with the communication restrictions, right? Like to me,
don't forget, you had the mail, you had telegraph, and you had telephone. And these guys were making enough money that a lot of them had telephones, because they were actually much wealthier than they appeared in their little shops and cigar rolling factories.
Than they thought. But I think the mafia structure we see today started with Maranzano and the way he reestablished after the assassination of Masseria, which we'll get to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's possible, because it was loosely franchised, like I was just saying, and there was some competition. They weren't killing each other yet. There wasn't the gang wars going on. There was a little bit of that in New Orleans back in the 1890s with Macheca, Esposito, and Provenzano. Yes. Right, they really aren't. They're fighting over the docks, the labor in the docks, and getting a little bit of money from each paycheck from everybody on the docks. They're fighting over the distribution of produce coming from South America, coming in and out of the United States, and they're fighting over mainly labor, issues. Who's going to control the labor? This is before unions, and then finally, their main money, though, funny enough, was extortion, and it was extorting wealthy.
Like, you can make that much money off of extortion when you got so much other things going.
Tons. These guys were rich, man.
Dude, they were extorting people for $10,000. Yeah, they were extorting people for, say, one like a Dr. Purpura, a famous extortion. He was from New York, and the Society of the Banana, which was the largest, most organized Black Hand group in the United States, that was franchised all over the country. They extorted Dr. Purpura, and he gave them separate individual cash payments of over $10,000.
Wow.
$10,000 in 1909, 8 and 9, add anywhere close to 3 zeros to it, so it's close to 10 million today. So that's a nice chunk of change, tax free. You know, don't forget, 3 loaves of bread cost 1 penny in 1909. A loaf of bread today is $4, so it's $12 for 3 loaves of bread today. What used to be 1 penny. So think of how much $10,000 would be today. That's how much the dollar is lost in value since then. So,
hey, real quick, I haven't been on YouTube in a while, so I want to give a shout out to Evan, Cindy, and especially Johnny.
hey, by the way, any questions popping up? I haven't seen much of anything on my small screen.
Not yet. We'll let you know.
No, not too many. They're just
well. Why don't we bounce out of the Black Hand?
Well,
I'll just give one last fun thing. One of the guys that my great grandfather put in Leavenworth. The reason that we kept the story hidden for a century is because he went to his nephew's property in Portland, Oregon, which was the Black Hand franchise in Oregon. And he and Antonio Lima, Salvatore and Antonio Lima, decided to go down to San Francisco eventually. Antonio then took over Frank Lanza's mob as the boss in San Francisco. And then when Antonio died fairly young of a non-accident, Salvatore Lima, his uncle, the guy that was originally the overseer of Cleveland and Cincinnati, became the godfather of San Francisco till the 1960s. And that's one reason why our family, they were all around us. We had to keep quiet about it for a century. That's the reason you guys haven't heard this story.
They probably had a
people, they probably don't even realize Hammy is a direct descendant of the Inspector Oldfield that basically broke the nut on the Black Hand.
Yeah,
he's the first guy to prove that they were organized. Yeah.
Yeah, the first person to bring them to trial, like a RICO kind of indictment, right? Conspiracy charge or something?
Yes, they used the conspiracy, and they used the postal laws. Just like they would, they used the post office laws that they conspired to extort using the mails, which was a federal offense, and that's how they were able to round them up all around the United States and drag them all in.
And they all got convicted too. That's the crazy thing. Back then, you figure like all these other people who got off with things, like they could have paid their way out of it. You would think back then, right?
Well, they tried. There were 15 indictments, and they were able to. They paid $300,000 in 1910 for their defense attorneys. Some of them were actually former U.S. generals. It was the first dream team defense. I mean, O.J. Simpson, wasn't the first guy to have a dream team. Yeah. And $300,000 back then would be $300 million, close to $300 million today. And they paid these guys who they quashed or squashed 14 of the indictments from the grand jury, and for murder, bombing, kidnapping, all kinds of stuff, conspiracy to do that.
Which was made easier by the fact that when they busted them, they left them with all their money.
Yeah, well, that was something that was done back then because widows and orphans did not inherit the money from the fathers when the father died. It was put into an escrow, and a guardian was appointed because women didn't inherit money at the time until after suffrage in the late 1919 or so. So these law enforcement officers back then, when they took down a heavy duty outlaw, like a Butch Cassidy, or a Harry Tracy, or somebody from the Wild Bunch, or somebody, in those days, they would usually give as much of the money as possible if the guy was married, and they'd kind of pretend like the money had been spent or lost, and that way the widow and the orphan would do okay, because there was no welfare or anything back then either. So these postal inspectors left Salvatore Lima's money. He left it with with Salvatore's wife and kids, and with his brother-in-law's wife and kids, his sister-in-law and her kids. And they also didn't want to have to sit there and count it and prove that they didn't steal any of it, because they wanted to stay uncorruptible or still appear to be uncorruptible. So there was two motivations behind them not taking the money.
Untouchables too, if you look at it.
Yeah, that was that was their attitude. Yeah. Their families lived hundreds of miles away, usually, from where they worked. Oldfield's family was in Athens, Ohio, near Ohio University, and he worked out of his headquarters was in Columbus. And the other guys that he signed up were from all over the country. And he vetted each one of them for their skill set during the investigation. But like I said, we had to wait 100 years to tell the story, man, because it can be a little rough, to have them living around you, and you don't want them to know that you're the great grandson or the grandson of, what a guy that ruined their family.
Yeah, but it's a little more virtuous. To make a comparison between like Oldfield, Inspector Oldfield, and like Elliot Ness, right? To me, Elliot Ness was a little bit of a douchebag because the mafia was providing a service. Prohibition was bullshit. Everybody wanted the booze, and they were providing a service, okay? The Black Hand was a parasite. They were providing no service. They were just sucking money that they didn't earn, and to me, bad guys, right? And even by my standards, bad guys.
They didn't really, Bill, they didn't really provide, quote, protection, all right?
Yeah, the
protection racket was there. You were basically protecting, paying them to protect yourself from them. They weren't really protecting you from any other gang, because the other gangs they had control over. Unless it was another ethnicity, like an Irish gang or something. But most of the time, like an Irish gang or whatever, they wouldn't go after a Italian-owned business. They would go after an Irish-owned business.
Black Hand times, right?
No, absolutely not.
Why?
What's that?
Wouldn't they? What was the reason?
It was very. They focused on their own ethnicity because each country, had organized crime for hundreds of years. So when the immigrants from that country, let's say Ireland, came to the United States, the Irish bad guys or mob, followed them. Well, if you could just prey on the Irish people because you're legendary in Ireland, the people are almost superstitious. They're so afraid of you. So
they know
you didn't have
who you are. They know who
you
are.
So exactly, Staxx. So you didn't have to go after another ethnicity or go rob banks or anything like that. You just focused on your own ethnicity. There were plenty of them in the country, millions of them. Some of them doing really well. The ones that weren't doing that well, you only took a penny from them every so often. But like I said, 3 loaves of bread cost a penny back then. So, I mean, you were, extorting money. But when you were getting, the Black Hand was getting large amounts of money from these people, though.
I'll be right back. I think my wife is locked out.
Wait a minute. I thought he was in New York.
I'll bring him back on when I see him jump on. I'll see him down there. All
right. Staxx.
So you said,
I thought, yeah, go ahead.
But there was there instance when they did go after the opposite ethnicities where they fought each other. There had to be some quarrels between the two groups, right?
Okay, I'll tell you how that used to start. Like I said, it was everybody kind of picked their own territory. Now, what I mean by that, gangs mark their territory now, with graffiti and whatnot. What they would do is they would pick an industry that they had a lot of their particular skill in. The old joke is that the Italians or the Sicilians, the trash industry, the concrete industry, the produce industry, right? With importing, exporting produce and distributing. Every produce truck you see around most cities has an Italian last name on it. It's like Arrigo's, produce distribution or whatever. So the Irish focused on working on the railroads for the most part, and moving into as firemen, police officers, that kind of thing. And so everybody kind of picked their area.
Is this one of the pictures from your book?
That one is not. I can't tell exactly what bridge that is. I'm looking at it right now.
It's from one of the Black Hand things that I got off the internet.
Oh, there's tons of stuff, on there. I'm trying to figure out if the bridge on your to the right of you in the picture is the Brooklyn Bridge. Looks like it.
It is.
Yeah, and the guy right next to you is Francis de Mayo.
Isn't it?
That's Mussolini. Oh, it's okay. It's too small for me to see it. So why don't we let me get out of the black hand, and why don't you guys jump over to talk a little bit about
In a
Mussolini and
minute,
how
tell
the
us about
immigration
the
of him.
mail. Tell us about the mail, man.
Tell us about the mayo.
You want me to talk about De Mayo? All right.
I do.
Francis De Mayo basically was the first Italian to be like a chameleon and infiltrate the mob, and he also did that with many other ethnicities, Portuguese. He looked so Mediterranean that they kind of mixed him, and when he was hired. So what he did is in 1890, he was already 26 years old. He'd already been famous for learning Italian, French, Portuguese, English, Spanish. Being able to dock a ship almost single-handedly into a harbor. Not a boat, a ship, and be able to bend, work in a steel mill, that kind of stuff. He'd learned so many skills that, and he could wear disguise and that sort of thing. So when he came over from Italy, William and Robert Pinkerton, people have probably heard of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, which was a very powerful international private detective agency that would use unscrupulous methods if necessary because they were private, kind of like Blackwater did in Iraq and Afghanistan. They were private army. Well, so Robert and William Pinkerton decided that we're going to hire Francis De Mayo. Amazing. Sometimes he went by the Raven because he had black hair, jet black hair. That was his kind of his code name inside the Pinkertons. And in my book, in chapter 3, is a whole chapter about the Raven, about Francis De Mayo, because later on
they got no Italian guy to infiltrate.
Exactly. He actually helped my great-grandfather to bust the Society of the Banana. I can't get into the details of it because we've always kept that secret about De Mayo. All I can say is that he did some infiltration work. And, you can read the book if you want to find out a little bit more. But
and he could pose as a complete dirtbag. He blended. I mean, the guy was brilliant.
I'll tell you what he did in 1890.
To do what he did.
Oh, he actually he was quoted. Robert Pinkerton asked him in 1890 when he said, "I want you to infiltrate the New Orleans mafia." And later on in life, De Mayo was interviewed, and they asked him, like in the 1920s or 30s, they said, "Why the heck did you do it?" He goes, "When I was that age," he goes, "I was unstoppable. I was made of concrete. I was made of steel. No one could touch me, And he said, I never, ever, said I wouldn't take a job, no matter how terrifying it was. Talk about that guy had guts.
He's kind of the counterpart, though, to these gangsters, because when you're like finding out that these guys are double-crossing gangsters and they're stealing money off the top, and you're like, what are they thinking, man? It's a certain death sentence. They're like this guy. They got rocks in their head.
Thought he was going to die at any time. What he did was, so when Daniel Hennessy, the police chief of New Orleans, was assassinated in 1890, Mayor Shakespeare from New Orleans rounded up a bunch of Italians that were that they pretty much tied, had some, they could tell that they had some tie to the murder, right? Mm-hmm. And so they ended up putting grabbed 11 of them, right, and put it in jail. One of those, by the way, was Joseph Macheca, who was one of the biggest bosses of New Orleans. You had Esposito, Provenzano, and Macheca were the three main bosses of New Orleans. So he was one of the 11 guys they put in there. Now, the police didn't know, and Mayor Shakespeare of the Crescent City, New Orleans, didn't know that one of the guys they had was actually one of the bosses, of the 11 that were suspected of killing or conspiring to kill the police chief, Daniel Hennessy. So the Secret Service, the Pinkertons, and the district attorney, Lunsberger of New Orleans, all conspired together and worked out a way to get De Mayo a fake name, get newspaper press around the country of him being an Italian mobster from Italy named Antonio Ruggiero, who was a famous counterfeiter in Italy. And they had Chicago Sun-Times editors working on it, New Orleans Picayune editors working on it, and they printed in the papers and whatnot that this Antonio Ruggiero had been arrested. It was really Francis De Mayo. And so the Secret Service, the Pinkertons, and the district attorney in New Orleans then had him arrested, and near Philadelphia, or near Chicago, and he was going to be imprisoned in New Orleans for some odd reason. So he gets shipped down to New Orleans, and they stick him in jail
so
with
he
those
could
11
be
guys.
transferred with these criminals.
Right. So they put him in jail with those 11 conspirators who killed the police chief of New Orleans.
I got a picture of him. I got a picture of him. Hold on.
You got a picture of the Raven? Really? By the way, there's only, I'll tell you right now which one it is. There's only 3 known pictures of him in his entire life because he was terrified of getting his picture taken because he was undercover so much.
Yeah, these are they're drawings because they're so old. Yeah.
Well, no, that's not because they're old. It's because he wouldn't let anybody photograph him because he was undercover. Yeah, that's him. That's when he was looking grubby. You know, there he is. That's a picture of him right there. Yeah. You see how different he can look? That's Tom Duffy, though. That's not, that guy was Tom Duffy. That wasn't DeMeo. Yeah, Frank DeMeo or Francesco or Francis, whatever you want to call him. So he's sent down there, and over a period of months, and basically he starts getting sick, pneumonia, starving to death, emaciated, so he can really look like he's one of their, like a bad guy. He's trying to really look like, he's being abused and whatnot. So the other prisoners, feel sorry for him and bring him in and under their wing, because when he first was brought in, they didn't even think he was Antonio Ruggiero from Italy. They're like, nah, he's still over in Italy. He can't be in the United States. He couldn't have been here. And finally, he starts winning him over, and he wins over this one young guy who was in the one of the 11. His name was Manuel Polizzi.
Yeah, he homes in on the weak link.
Yeah, and he starts befriending him and getting the guy to, when the families are sending in food to these guys, like, wine, cheese, whatever, they were allowed to send them in prison because the prison food was slop. So the only way to keep these guys alive was the families had to send them, food every day. So DeMeo got this guy Polizzi so afraid that every time that his family gave him a bottle of wine or whatever, DeMeo would dump out the wine and say, no, it's probably got cyanide in it. He'd smell it and he'd say, I think there might be cyanide in this. And so Polizzi started trusting DeMeo, thinking, this guy's saving my life, because Polizzi was involved with the murder, and he thought that his own guys, his own gang was going to kill him. Well, Polizzi was so young, he was, because as part of the murder, they brought in some well-established made men, but they also brought in a couple greenhorns to commit them more to the mob. Right. You're going to be part of the conspiracy, so that way we own you. Polizzi was one of those kind of guys.
I have a picture of the sketch of where the murder happened with the police chief, and it shows like where he was when he got shot. I guess it was A. And
yeah, he was coming off the porch of his mom's house.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The police chief lived with his mother, by the way.
Hennessy's house. The front was the back. A is the fence in front of police chief Hennessy's house. The back street. B, the point where Hennessy was shot. C, the point from which the first volley was fired. So C is where the shots came from.
I'll tell you how they caught how they now what happened was so DeMeo gets this guy Manuel Polizzi to trust him. Manuel Polizzi is afraid that the mob's going to kill him because they know he's weak and they know he might confess, right? Mm-hmm. So DeMeo, leverages that and says, I'm going to watch over you. I'll take care of you. I'm an experienced counterfeiter. I'm famous Antonio Ruggiero, the famous counterfeiter. I can take care of you. I've got experience. So what happens is then they start talking about the murder. And over time, over a period of weeks, this took weeks, Polizzi starts to trust DeMeo and tells him and confesses exactly how the entire murder was plotted, how it was committed, where each guy stood, and even what song was whistled to signal everybody. And it was called the Marcia Reel, or the Italian Royal March. The only way Polizzi would know that is if he was standing right there with the other guys, because you can't hear down the street when someone's whistling a little quiet tune. So
plus, this way they how he would do it, because you're trying to impress this guy, right? Because he's a legend, right? And you're just a little bitch.
Yeah, Ruggiero's a legend, yeah.
Like, hey, I'm not just a little punk guy. Here's what I know, and here's what I've done. And you can
see how so he confesses everything to him, and over time, and then finally, and so what's going on is that we got Agent Wild from the Secret Service is staying down in New Orleans in a hotel, and they've Agent Wild and Lunsberger, the district attorney, have hired a attorney to make it look like he's Antonio Ruggiero's attorney. Now, the attorney doesn't know that Antonio Ruggiero is actually the detective undercover, Francis DeMeo. He knows nothing about the plot. So DeMeo keeps giving him little notes to the attorney, and the attorney is only told that he has to give them to Agent Wild of the Secret Service. And the attorney doesn't even know that Agent Wild is a Secret Service agent. There's only 6 people in the United States who even know that DeMeo's there. Right. And so a lot of people that are involved in it have no idea that he's not actually Antonio Ruggiero. So the attorney keeps giving the notes to Agent Wild and District Attorney Lunsberger like he's told, and little by little, the confession information is coming out, about who was involved. So technically, out of the 11 men that were in prison, 9 of them were part of the conspiracy. All right. And 2 of them were not, but they were still affiliated with gangs and mafia there, but they weren't involved in the actual conspiracy plot and the actual firing of the different weapons from different angles to kill Hennessy on the street at night. So finally, DeMeo is so emaciated and whatever, he finally gets the last note out that he's got all the information. They get him out of there, and he's in such bad shape that, they think he might die. So immediately, you're going to laugh, they take him to a hotel, hidden in a hotel under cover, like blankets over him and whatnot, like you see nowadays, and hidden in a wagon. And they scrub him down and clean him up, de-lice him. They de-louse him. I mean, he's just in nasty shape, freaking bed bugs, bites all over him and everything else. And you're going to laugh. They immediately bring in a stenographer and police witness and the district attorney and other witnesses. And in the hotel, they make him give a deposition from memory of everything that Manuel Polizzi told him. And apparently DeMeo had almost a photographic memory. So for over 4 hours, he recited almost word for word everything that I just told you, that about Polizzi and about the murder. And they actually got it all written down and transcribed on paper. And today I've got to find out where that is, but somewhere in the National Archives there's a copy or the original, like a carbon copy of that original deposition. It would really be amazing.
What was the reason for, what was the plot reason for the murder? Like what was the whole?
Well, Daniel Hennessy. Okay, what had happened was
that at the end of the last show.
I don't know, but Daniel Hennessy was kind of an old-fashioned pearl-handled revolver, police chief. He was the youngest police chief in the United States. He was kind of like Wyatt Earp. And he said, I'm going to clean up, the mafia and the drugs and the crime and the murders and all that, in the Crescent City. And he was in the newspaper all the time. He says, I'm going to go after the Italians. The Italians are the #1 problem in this town. They have all the gangs, the murders, whatever. So he's out there with literally pearl-handled revolvers walking around. And you've got Giuseppe Esposito. You've got the Provenzano clan, Joseph Macheca, these different bosses that are kind of always vying for power, in New Orleans, but 3 mob bosses with all and running all the.
Oh no, his battery went dead.
All the gangs, getting down, arresting them like crazy, putting them in jail all over the place. They're busting up the gangs. They're really making, he's driving everybody crazy. All the bad guys crazy. So they got a plot to get rid of him. So that's how it happened. And anyway, so real quick, we get to the 11 Italians. So in October 1891, this is a year later now, 1 year after Hennessy's murder in October of 1890, there's a massive trial. They got the grand jury has been, is indicted these 9 guys. They got the confessions from Manuel Polizzi. They've got everything. And Joseph Macheca, Esposito, and Provenzano, they pay off the jury pool selecting, and they get 2 private detectives that they hired themselves onto the jury. These are not Pinkerton detectives. These are just 2 other private detectives that'll do anything for money. So they get 2 of them onto the jury. So what happens, we'll just say the trial goes through its whole process, even with full confessions, all the information about the conspiracy down to every last little detail. 6 of them get acquitted by the jury, and 3 of them get a hung jury. So that drives the whole. This is sensational. The whole country knows about this trial, by the way. It's all over national news. It's going over the wire overseas. The whole world knows about it. These guys all get acquitted or hung jury, and there's this massive, explosion of anger of the people of New Orleans. So, out of nowhere, somehow, one of the general stores, all their shotguns and rifles somehow get handed out on the front porch. And this massive mob goes to the prison, grabs these guys, including Manuel Esposito, who thought if he confessed, which he did confess in trial because he was so afraid that he would get killed by the mob, he wanted to protect, that he actually openly confessed in trial and explained it all in trial. So it wasn't just hidden. There's the mob right there. So they go into jail. They grab all these 9 Italians, and one by one.
That drawing's a little manipulated. Those kids look like they're freaking 9.
Right?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, of course they do.
They do. Like
fake news. Fake news.
They make it look like they're like so young.
Oh, and look at that. So what they did is, see, this is interesting how they do this. This is wrong. What they did is they hung them all first, one at a time, and then they shot holes through them with the shotguns and the rifles they got from the general store.
What?
And
which I feel like is unnecessary.
Well, they wanted to make sure they were dead. They by the way, the New Orleans Picayune, which is
cut loose, and then they run off to go play.
They just
the famous headline
on their hands and rip them apart.
Yeah,
and then shoot him to see if he's dead yet. Well,
what was funny, guys, is that the New Orleans Picayune was back then was called the Daily Picayune. All right. And the editor was a real good friend of my great grandfather's, so he was able to get a lot of information about the New Orleans mob. The background from these newspaper editors were very good. But anyway, the headline in there was pretty bad because it basically said they got what they deserved. All right, on the headline, the whole country was in favor of these guys, these 9 Italians who'd been acquitted, even though they were guilty. No one admitted to which one actually fired the rounds except for Manuel Polizzi. But they were all guilty of the conspiracy, involved in it either on the street. That's Daniel Hennessy right there.
Yeah, this is the cop, right? That got killed.
Yeah, that's the chief of police. Look how young he is. I mean, that's not a chief of police right there. That guy's like in his 30s, late 20s, early 30s.
He's the guy from last week, right? It was the Dagos, right?
Yeah, he said it was the Dagos. It was the Dagos, his famous words on the street when laying there in the mud with shotgun holes in him. Took him 3 days to die, though. He didn't die right in the street. He died in the hospital 3 days later. But so anyway, so these guys all get lynched, right?
That had to be.
It's one of the biggest lynches in U.S. history. And Italians were considered basically dirt, back then. You couldn't get much lower than an Italian immigrant in the United States. Now,
we'll get to like Bloody Williamson later and things like that. I know guys that are still upset about that.
Yeah, but don't forget that, by the way, that a lot of Italians were incarcerated during World War II in the United States. You hear about the Japanese internment, but you don't hear about the Italians that were put away. They've never been apologized to either. We've never gotten a national apology from the president for that. But
screw an apology, I want reparations.
Me too.
Yeah, I want money. I want money too. Yeah.
My grandma wants reparations.
Yeah. So these guys get lynched, right? They all get lynched, right?
Drawings. I got some more drawings from the time, and
let's see here.
Post them.
Well, what was, like I said, that the New Orleans Picayune, the Daily Picayune, seeing that in the headline, that the whole country, by the way, was in favor. It went over the wires, the news wire, the AP, Associated Press wire. Yeah, that's the kind of thing. People were out on the streets cheering that these guys had been murdered. And
crazy.
Hey, Hammy, somebody's asking, John S. is asking, Hammy, didn't you cover this on Mob States of America?
I covered it on a TV show on the History Channel called United Stuff of America about, I don't know, it's been 4 or 5 years ago. It was the 3rd episode of their first season.
That's where I seen you the first time. That's where I've seen you
Yeah,
before, and I knew
I,
I did, and that's
I
where
have
it
the gray
is.
hair, man. Look at all the gray hair I have now. Yeah, but I look almost as bad as Bill Crooks does now.
What?
Geez.
I look amazing.
Hey, it's the three generations, man. I'm the next one to go. My gray is starting to come through.
I don't know what you're talking
Man,
about, dude. I look great.
look at that slick back you got going there.
We're gonna
Yeah, got
we're
brill
gonna be
cream in
able to
there.
we're if you guys are up for it, we're gonna cover the whole mafia once we get up to the 80s, 90s to the 2000s. There's a lot to go over. Like
Yeah,
it's
we'll
kind
walk it
of
up. We've been
We can
kind
doing
of
work
these
our
now,
way
or
up.
we could kind of cut it now if you
yeah.
want.
Yeah, we can cut it down now. We just end with that DeMeo was amazing, and he continued working for as a private, investigator hired either by the Pinkertons or other. My great grandfather borrowed him for a little while against the Black Hand Society. Granted, he was already getting pretty old by then. He was already almost in his 40s. By the time he worked for my great grandfather, that was 20 years after he did, this with Daniel Hennessy and the Pinkertons.
So he was
Going
seasoned.
after
He was a seasoned undercover by then.
Yeah.
he's done everything. I mean, my friend and amazing creator and co-writer David Steenhook out of California. He's working on something with a modern man who's still alive today. I won't get into the details, and we'll let David come on sometime and actually talk about it on your show. But this guy was the first DEA agent ever hired, and he was called the Chameleon. And he did the same thing that Francis DeMeo did all over the world, infiltrating Pablo Escobar's gang, all kinds of places. And he's still alive. Somehow he made it, and he's retired, and maybe quote semi-retired. I think he's asked to do things now and then that he'll never tell us. But he's definitely in the tradition of Francis DeMeo because he's also Italian as well.
Hey, if you like
Pretty
this
amazing.
show, if you really like this show, press the subscribe button, press the like button. Come back next Thursday. We'll be back on around the same time. So we're going to try to do this once a week, and we're going to cover the whole mafia until we run out of shit to talk about.
Brother, we're going to bring on some more people. By the way, let me throw a book out there if people want to know about this New Orleans story and the beginning of the mafia in New Orleans. The great-granddaughter of Joseph Macheca. I told you one of the 9 guys that was acquitted. Actually, he was one of the 11. He didn't get killed. The first 11 arrested. There's a book by Thomas Hunt, one of the most amazing mafia historians and crime historians in the United States, that he did with the great-granddaughter of Joseph Macheca. It's called Deep Water. And it's a very long, detailed book. If you want the bibliography and the footnotes and all the details about that Esposito, Provenzano, Macheca, everybody coming into New Orleans and how the mob really started, that is the book. Again, it's called Deep Water by Thomas Hunt, Hunt. An amazing historian. And I'm just promoting it because that's where I even used it for research for my book.
No,
Hey, we got a Facebook guy says, Bill, have you forgotten about me, man? Extra large black or gray hoodie.
I did not
Hey,
I
man,
did
give me
not
this hoodie.
I did not forget about you, but I had a problem with the logo. Like I said before, I had a problem. They sent me a message, cease and desist and all this bull, and I don't want to deal with it. So find the logo and have it printed on a shirt. I'm not gonna get into all this legal wrangling over a logo. So I just drop a logo and keep it moving. It is what it is. If you guys want to see more, come back next Thursday. Hit the like button. Go get that book, Deep Water, and go get his book, Oldsfield. It's right here, and I'll put a link for it in the description. And you could give me my 20% every Thursday, Bill. That's cool with you, right?
Yeah.
Man, it works for me, guys.
I've read this book cover to cover, of course. I want to say I did a podcast, 2 or 3 parts, right, Bill, on your thing.
We did 2 parts on Partners in Crime podcast with Bill Crooks. It's one of the best podcasts I've ever had fun to do. He's got the explosions, the screams, the murders. he's did a great job editing it. It's
Nobody
about
does it better.
it's called Sam Lima and the Black Hand. It's season 2, episode 10 and 11 of the Partners in Crime podcast by Bill Crooks.
And go check out.
You guys can have a blast.
Check out the one that he did on me too.
Yeah.
Oh, yours is awesome, Bill. Staxx.
Yeah.
I've only listened to the first part of it. I got to do the second part.
Yeah,
that is amazing.
We got some things in the works. So only good things from here. And I appreciate both of you for taking your time and coming on. And I look forward to next Thursday. Make sure you hit the subscribe notification bell. And we'll see you guys next week. Peace. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you, Bill.